Everyone believed Littlefinger was untouchable, Westeros' ultimate puppet master, the man who could twist armies, queens, and entire kingdoms with a whisper. But that myth collapses the moment you uncover how Arya Stark, the girl he once ignored, quietly became the one opponent he never saw coming. While Littlefinger played his dangerous game of secrets, wars, and manipulation, he never imagined that the person who would end him wasn't a seasoned lord or a brilliant strategist, but the young Stark girl he dismissed as harmless. And that is where it becomes shocking. Arya didn't defeat him with armies or alliances. She beat him with something far more lethal, an ability to read through masks he spent his whole life hiding behind. The man who preached that knowledge was power never realized the real danger was the one person he completely overlooked, and she was watching him the entire time. Arya's ability to outsmart Littlefinger begins years before she even confronts him. Her time in Bravos, training with the faceless men, didn't just teach her to fight or change identities. It taught her to watch, to listen, to observe people's smallest movements, their slipping lies, their quiet patterns. She became the kind of person who could walk into a room and understand the truth without being told. Littlefinger had built his power by reading others, but Arya had learned to read people without letting them read her back. And that skill becomes the core reason she succeeds where countless grown men failed. Littlefinger's biggest mistake was believing Arya was still the emotional child he remembered from the past. In his eyes, she was a Stark girl returning home, impulsive, aggressive, and suspicious. Someone easy to provoke and easy to manipulate. But Arya was not a girl driven by fear or confusion. She returned to Winterfell with a level of mental clarity that Littlefinger could not detect, because he mistook her silence for naivety. He saw her confrontations with Sansa and believed she was predictable. In reality, Arya was testing the room, testing Littlefinger, testing her sister, and testing the intentions behind every move. When Arya discovered the letter Sansa wrote years ago under Cersei's pressure, Littlefinger thought he had successfully planted the seed of a Stark civil war. This was exactly the kind of chaos he needed. But Arya's reaction was not emotional panic, it was awareness. She knew that letter didn't fit the full picture. She had lived through King's Landing. She had watched Cersei control people like a puppeteer. She understood manipulation when she saw it. And this is where Littlefinger began losing control without realizing it. He thought Arya was falling into his trap, when in truth Arya had already started observing him. Every whisper he exchanged, every shadow he walked in, every guard he spoke to, Arya noticed. Littlefinger spent so much time watching the Stark sisters that he never stopped to wonder if someone was watching him back. In Winterfell, Littlefinger tried to run the same old tricks: divide, isolate, mislead, feed half-truths, and wait for chaos to bloom. But Arya had spent years dismantling identities and motives as part of her training. To her, Littlefinger's behavior was loud and obvious. She could see the misdirection the way a skilled hunter can read tracks in snow. And by the time Littlefinger realized she wasn't reacting the way he expected, Arya had already unraveled his intentions. Another crucial turning point is Arya's understanding of fear. Littlefinger manipulated fear better than anyone else, but Arya was no longer afraid of death, confrontation, or political games. She had survived the faceless men. She had survived wandering the world alone. She had been stabbed, hunted, starved, betrayed, and wounded. What threat could Littlefinger possibly present? Arya was the one person in Winterfell he could not intimidate. And when a man who lives on intimidation meets someone beyond fear, his entire strategy collapses. Where Arya truly surpasses Littlefinger is in her understanding of performance. Littlefinger's power came from the masks he wore: loyal advisor, humble servant, grieving friend. Arya had been trained to see masks not as barriers but as clues. Every slip, every hesitation, Every overly crafted gesture told her something about him. Littlefinger didn't realize he was standing in front of someone who had become an expert at detecting lies long before she returned to Westeros. And yet, the most powerful part of Arya's victory is not the spycraft or the observation. It is trust, real trust between her and Sansa. Littlefinger never understood sisterhood. He assumed Arya would be jealous of Sansa's position. He assumed Sansa would feel threatened by Arya's strength. But both sisters had grown through pain, loss, and survival. They had learned to read the world differently, and despite their clashes, they understood each other far better than Littlefinger calculated. He believed he was dividing them. In reality, he was uniting them. Sansa knew Littlefinger better than anyone. Arya saw his lies more clearly than anyone. Together, they became the one force he had never truly faced, a united Stark family. Arya didn't need to manipulate Sansa into believing Littlefinger was dangerous. Sansa already knew. But Arya's fearlessness gave Sansa the strength to confront the one man who had shaped so much of her past. And Sansa's political sharpness gave Arya the perfect setup. For once, Littlefinger walked into someone else's trap. When the moment finally came in the Great Hall, the silence was everything. Littlefinger stood there expecting another political trial, one he could twist and escape from. He had gotten out of worse situations. He believed he could talk his way out again. But the game had changed. The Stark sisters had flipped the board entirely. As Sansa listed his crimes, Arya watched him with the calmness of someone who had already accepted the outcome. Littlefinger's voice shook, his excuses sounded thin, and for the first time in the entire series, he was powerless. The man who once controlled lords and queens stood exposed before two women he had underestimated from the beginning. And here is the most important truth. Arya killed Littlefinger, but she didn't defeat him alone. She defeated him because she understood something he never learned. Being underestimated is a weapon. Littlefinger believed power belonged to those who controlled information. Arya proved that true power belongs to those no one sees coming. For years, people dismissed her because she wasn't a lady, wasn't soft, didn't fit the mold of what a noble woman should be. But those same expectations made her invisible to men like Littlefinger. They allowed her to move quietly, to learn silently, and to strike decisively. She turned every weakness people projected onto her into an advantage. What makes Arya's victory so satisfying is how symbolic it is. Littlefinger used women throughout his entire life. Catelyn, Lisa, Sansa. He built an empire on exploiting their pain and vulnerability. But in the end, it was a woman he couldn't read, a woman he couldn't predict, and a woman he couldn't break who ended the game he had been playing for decades. Arya Stark didn't just outsmart Littlefinger. She became the one player he never saw on the board until it was too late. And she didn't do it by copying his methods. She did it by being everything he underestimated. Observant, patient, fearless, loyal to her family, and sharper than any blade she carried. Littlefinger spent his life believing chaos was a ladder. Arya proved that sometimes chaos is a trap, and he walked straight into it. Thanks for watching. If you liked the video, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Stay tuned for more content, and I'll see you in the next one.